So I'm joined by Dr. Francis A. Boyle, Professor of International Law at the University of Illinois, and you've quite a biography. I don't think I can do it justice in the short amount of time we have here. You've represented
time on it.
Yeah, but you've represented national and international groups such as the Nation of Hawaii, the Lakota Nation, the Palestinian delegation to the Middle East peace negotiations. You've also represented citizen groups in Bosnia, as well as numerous death penalty and human rights cases across the world. You're a strong critic of US foreign policy since 9/11, and in fact I saw you quite recently in Malaysia attempting to bring cases of war crimes against George Bush.
And Tony Blair.
Oh really? Oh, so very good.
We got a guilty verdict, right.
A noble cause, I may say. So, as I said, I can't really do justice to your biography in this short time, but you've just published United Ireland, Human Rights and International Law. And I think you've wanted to address this Irish issue for a long time. Am I right in saying that?
Well, I've also worked on Irish issues for many years here in the United States as they come up, and internationally. Sean MacBride was my good friend, and he had me up in the north doing work up there too. So,
and a lot of people who will watch this will be in Ireland, and I don't think we realise here in Ireland there's a groundswell of opinion among Irish Americans who regard this time in history as a genocide. And a lot of groups have sprung up, and a lot of organisations have sprung up to that effect. Would you agree that there is a groundswell of opinion growing among Irish Americans who regard this time in history as a genocide?
Yeah, well, actually, I first argued genocide back in 1987 against the Brits or so. And the British Consul General was offended. And they submitted a the British government, a 9-page single brief to refute me to the Illinois General Assembly. Well, we won anyway. But yeah, I'm not going back to what Cromwell did to us. I'm a dual national. But the point was that here in the United States, yes, large numbers of Irish Americans have reached the conclusion that the so-called famine was genocide. In my book, I presented it up in Chicago at the Irish American Cultural Center, starting at about 11 a.m. till 6 p.m. And one group of people after another, after another, after another, just came up to me to talk about the genocide, and their families suffered because, as you know, so many Irish who had to leave came to America, to Canada. So we have large numbers of famine survivors, genocide survivors here in the United States. And they still suffer today. The psychic horror I'm talking about, it's not my family. I want to make it clear. My grandparents left Hartford in 1921. But even there, as you know, out in the West Coast, the famine was terrible. But it's almost as if we have here in America a case of intergenerational post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yes.
Going back to the family, for sure.
Yeah.
It's still there. You can still talk to the people and hear the pain in their voices, as I did for an entire day up in Chicago last November. So this is a very important issue. It goes back here in America. We had the Irish famine curriculum put into the public schools in New Jersey and New York, and has taken off all over the country. That was, I guess, in the early 1990s, and I wrote the opinion letter to get that put in there, arguing it was genocide. And that's all all in the book as well. But you're going to see, there are genocide commemorations and events taking place all over America. It's a constant issue, and people still suffer today.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but I heard so much suffering.
Yeah. Well, I definitely see a strong presence from Americans on the internet and things like this, and I contrast to the attitudes in this country, because most people don't even want to think about it or look back at the event. So
well, that's correct. This is called psychic numbing and psychic blocking. Psychiatrists and psychologists will tell you that you don't want to think about it. The only way you can cope with it and what happened is to simply blot it out of your mind. So there are psychiatric and psychological explanations. And I understand, I'm a dual national. I'm not here to criticize my own people. I'm not. But, I'm a professor and I'm a lawyer. I deal with this professionally. And there are psychological and psychiatric explanations for why Irish people living in Ireland today simply don't want to come to grips with it at all. And it's perfectly understandable. I'm not criticizing anyone.
Yeah, there is a thing, I've never been able to track down where exactly this is in writing, but I remember in the piece of art, Swimming to Cambodia, the guy, I can't remember his name, who presented that, but he said that if you eliminate something like 15% of a population, you're going to cause irreversible psychological damage through the generations. And he said that's in a military order or something like that, like the Hague Convention or something like that. But I haven't been able to actually find that. But it is some sort of psychological damage that
it gets transmitted from one generation to the next. We see this with the Jewish people, where the next generation now, people my age, who themselves did not suffer through the Holocaust, but their parents did, are now reporting similar symptoms. Yes, and we're a few generations before, but it gets transmitted from generation to generation. And what we have to do, though, is be constructive about this. There is this terrible psychological harm and damage that is welled up in all of us. It's there, being Irish. But we want to put it to constructive uses. And so I thought I would, I've been dealing with it, as I said, as a legal issue for, since the mid-1980s. And so I've sort of been the point person here in America, making this argument and try to channel this, into legal directions.
Yeah.
Because, if it's not properly dealt with, it can become either self-destructive of yourselves or destructive of others. And we don't want any of that to happen.
Yeah. We need to recognize it to resolve it, kind of thing.
Correct. And then to move it into constructive directions. This is not a case of victimology. I can assure you, I'm no victim of anything. I'm a lawyer. I argue and win cases. I sue empires. I've sued the British. I've sued the Americans. I've sued the Yugoslavs. I've sued the Israelis. So I'm no victim of anything.
Yeah.
And the British dismiss this and say, this is victimology. This is not victimology. It's psychology, one. Two, it's a demand for justice.
Yeah. And just touching on that, you've successfully sued the British in relation to Bosnia. Do you want to briefly just go through?
I did sue them, but it was not able to come to fruition because the British threatened to starve the Bosnians to death.
Yeah. Just
as they did to us.
Yeah.
So at that point, the Bosnians had to back off. Right. But I don't doubt the Brits would have starved them to death if they had let me go forward. Look what they did to us. They starved at least 1 million of our people and then forced to death and forced maybe another 1 to 2 million into exile just to survive.
So now you're putting forward this case that the policies pursued by the British government in Ireland in 1845 to 1850 constituted genocide in accordance with the legal definitions of United States Code Title 18, the 1948 Genocide Convention, and the 1987 Genocide Convention Implementation Act. So by those definitions, this truly was a genocide that what happened in Ireland 1845 to 1850. So if we want to talk, we'll talk about the facts.
Yes, I've argued that consistently going back to about the mid-1980s, and the documentation for that is in my book. Now, having fought the British here in America on this, and their apologists and their lackeys and their sycophants in the academic world and the news media, their response is that, well, this wasn't really genocide, it was just laissez-faire economics. So for the first time ever, my book deals with the question of genocidal intent. We have 3 outstanding scholarly books on the factual elements of genocide, Woodham Smith and the 2 by Christine Keneally. Now, there's others out there, but those I think are the 3 best for the facts. But the 2 authors, of course, being historians, did not express an opinion on genocide. So what I did, and I had 2 law student research assistants, we went back through all the documentation and produced evidence, statements by the highest level officials of the British government at that time, that their intention by the policies they were pursuing was to reduce the number of Irish as such, and also to reduce the number of Catholics as such. It was primarily anti-Irish, but it was also, the evidence I have, primarily anti-Irish, but also anti-Catholic as well. And that's important because the Genocide Convention protects both ethnic, national, and religious groups. So we've got them on 3 different counts there. And the British response, and so in my book, I distinguish between motive and intent. They say, well, maybe they say their motive was laissez-faire economics, but their intent, as documented by the Prime Minister, Russell, Trevelyan, and everyone else, was clearly to reduce the number of Irish as such, killing them, inflicting severe physical, mental harm on them, and also deliberately inflicting conditions of life calculated to bring about their reduction in whole or in part. So again, we've got them on those 3 elements as well. Now, if you look at the Tony Blair apology, which I mentioned, so-called apology, which I mentioned in my book, Analyze, it's not really an apology. It was very cleverly and carefully drafted by British lawyers so as not to create any legal implications flowing from the statement. It's drafted to appear as if Tony Blair is saying he's sorry for something like Hurricane Katrina or the earthquake in Haiti or the tsunamis out in Asia. That's how it reads legally, and it was very carefully done that way. So this is an apology, and it's presented that way in the news media. It is. It's really, I would say, an insult and an obfuscation, and a propaganda ploy to get them off the hook. So I dealt with that in my book too. I also dealt with precedents, legal precedents, that I established arguing genocide at the International Court of Justice in Hague, the so-called World Court. When I was the lawyer for the Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina against Yugoslavia, and I used those precedents, which is the outstanding international law today on the issue of genocide, to say, yes, it fulfills the test. So that's the significance of the book. No one before me has really ventured into the question of genocide as a legal matter and making the legal argument. The three historians, yes, they did an excellent job, three of them, and I am indebted to them because I have to rely on their facts. I can't go over there to Ireland myself. You know, I'm a professor of law here. I have classes to teach students. So I had to rely on them going through the British archives in Ireland and digging out all those facts and other sources as well. And then I had two students here, excellent students, one Irish American, the other Polish American, pulling this all together comprehensively, factually, and then I crafted the legal argument.
Well, I'd like to go through the legal argument with you but first I'd like to go through some of the facts for people who mightn't be aware of some of the work of Christine Keneally and John Mitchell and Cecil Woodham Smith. So there was, according to the census in 1841, there was 10.8 million people in Ireland. And the census in 1851, 10 years later, there was 6.5 million people. So that's a reduction of 4.3 million people. Now, the potato blight first appeared in Europe, then England, then Ireland, but there was no mass starvation in any other country except for Ireland. So automatically there must have been a different policy in that country. And Cecil Woodham Smith, John Mitchell, Christine Keneally, they've all gone through in detail the quantities of food and livestock that were exported out of the country at the time. And I think when you hear this narrative given by Tony Blair, given by presidents of Ireland, senior academics, senior historians, they always refer to it as a natural disaster, but they leave out the crucial part of the narrative, the food exports, the amount of food that was being exported out of Ireland at that time. So, I mean, I've heard it said that the Irish didn't starve for potatoes, they starved for food. And
they would starve to death, there's no question about it. If you take a look at my book on page 49, now I have, as you know, a good 35 pages of facts there just dealing with genocidal intent. I don't deal with all the other, in law we have the question of intent and then the facts, the mens rea intent and then the actus rea, the acts.
Intent is crucial.
I couldn't go through all the acts. You've got those 3 books and more.
Yeah.
But what I pulled out in my book were all the elements on intent that is critical to establishing the charge of genocide and to refuting the British position that this was just laissez-faire economics. It was unfortunate, but it wasn't genocide. And I put in on page 49 to 50, I guess a succinct account by Professor Rogers that just goes through some of the highlighting of the facts. But again, if it came to trial, we would have separate arguments. We would have to do the facts first, comprehensively, as you're discussing. And then we would have to get to the intent, which is what I singled out in my book. So you'd have to do both. Yeah. And as you know, only recently, I believe, did Ireland even get back the Irish population to a reasonable level. At least here in the United States, it was reported that only recently did they get back to pre-famine levels.
Well, they're actually around post-famine levels, because ever since, I mean, every generation of Irish people, there's emigration. It's a fact of life. So it's actually amazing that the population at the end of the famine is similar to our population now in the 32 counties.
Then this has been misrepresented in the U.S. news media.
Okay.
It's been reported over here. Notice we're all pro-Anglophile, that Ireland's finally rebounded back to at least sort of a pre-famine level. But I stand corrected then.
No, we've a long way to go for that.
I'll have to keep that in mind in the future.
Well, our media here is very Anglophile as well, as I was saying. So they like to misrepresent, and as I said, they always leave out the crucial parts of the narrative.
Well, again, notice the Irish news media just fell hook, line, and sinker for the so-called Tony Blair apology.
Yeah.
But look, this is typical. Frantz Fanon explained this in his black skin, white masks, right? And so what we have in Ireland are, I guess you would say, green-skinned, but Brit masks. That's pretty much what we have the elite over there.
Yeah.
And I'm not criticizing them, but we need to apply the Frantz Fanon analysis to the Irish elite, whether it's the news media, government, or academia, and to realize that they see Ireland in British eyes.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's their fault, but that is the problem confronting us. And, without condemning my own people, they need to be educated.
Yeah.
And that's why I wrote this book. So I have dual nationality, and I also travel on an Irish passport too. So American and Irish. I travel with both of them. So I'm not here to criticize my own people over this, but I am here to identify the situation and to say this Irish American does not see Ireland in British eyes. My grandfather there, as you can see, the book is dedicated to him, fought with the IRA against Britain, Ireland's independence. And my grandmother helped him. So they had to flee in 1921. And my father was first in the country. So I've seen, the British from Irish America's perspective. And I have to say, and again, no offense intended to my own people, I've never shown one iota of respect for the British. I don't show them disrespect. But there's no kowtowing, bootlicking, or anything like that for me. And unfortunately, because of the Frantz Fanon phenomenon, we see a lot of that by the elite in Ireland. Yeah. And I'm not saying it's their fault. It's due to 800 years of colonial occupation produced that. But over here in Irish America, we're now running this country. And we have power. Political, economic, academic, and we don't see it that way.
Yeah, and that's evidenced by the fact that the Irish, I can't remember the name of the study, but it's now in the secondary level curriculum, the study of the Irish famine as a genocide. So that's evidence to your power over there.
Jim Mullins put that together, professional educator, and then as I explained in my book, he needed a legal opinion from me to the New Jersey State Holocaust Commission saying it was genocide, and I gave it to him. And that broke the logjam over here in America. Right?
Yeah. The Irish Famine Curriculum Committee, I believe.
It's online. It should be online.
Yeah. So if we can go through some of the evidence of intent.
Sure. It goes on forever. I mean, I pulled together, close to 35 pages, just based on William Smith, Keneally, And then some additional sources, my research assistants, my legal research assistants, law students here picked up. But you'll see numerous statements about reducing Irish, getting rid of Irish, getting rid of Catholics, bringing in Protestants to take their place. Now, I'm fine. My wife's Protestant, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. I'm not here to criticize Protestants because Irish Protestants, as you know, living in Ireland, also suffered from the famine up there in the north, though not to the extent that other regions of the country did. But this is something, you know, all Irish, Protestants, Catholics, Jews, we all share in common. So I went through all this, all these sources, and just picked out those statements, official statements by Russell, Trevelyan, and the other highest level officials of the British government at the time, stating that their intention was to get rid of Catholics, reduce the number or Irish, and reduce the number of Irish and or Catholic, right? And, you know, I have to say that putting all this material together was difficult for me, even being Irish American, and to pull it together and then to have to argue it, pull it together, proofread it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It was like the work I did for the Bosnians. It's very tough going. But there it is, and it's close to 30 pages, single-space material of intention only. Their intent to eliminate or reduce Irish and or Catholics.
And of course, this is around the time, the 19th century is around the time, the middle of the 19th century is around the time of Robert Malthus. So this was the ideology of the entire British government establishment, you know, elite society, was the fact that the poor people should be weeded out, and social Darwinism, survival of the fittest. So it was as if, you know, the law of gravity to them was the law of social Darwinism.
That is correct. However, that's not enough to establish genocide. And indeed, I quoted Malthus in there because you see, Stalin was very careful to eliminate from the Genocide Convention killing people, exterminating people on economic grounds, because he had a problem with the kulaks. So that's out of it. So what I needed to establish, and with all due respect to you, but that wouldn't be enough to prove genocide. What I needed to establish was specific intent to exterminate Irish and specific intent to exterminate Catholics, not just poor people. So I couldn't, I mentioned Malthus, and you are perfectly correct what you have said, but that is not enough to establish genocide.
No, I agree with you there.
You have to get that intent to exterminate Irish as such and Catholics as such. Now, most of the evidence was to exterminate Irish because the British attitude towards the Irish was the same attitude the Nazis had towards the Jews.
Yeah.
No different, except, you know, 1 million of us were starved to death. So, you know, it's a different, and indeed I recommend in my book that in deference to the Jewish people, we do not use the word Holocaust or Shoah. Let them have those words. We don't need them. We should respect their suffering and let them do it as they wish with those words. But certainly we qualify as a genocide. Indeed, the British and their sycophants and lackeys in the academic world, the news media say, oh, well, this wasn't the Nazi genocide against the Jews, it wasn't the Holocaust, and therefore it wasn't genocide. And the response to that is, as I pointed out there in the ad we did in the Irish Echo with my brother Jerry, also a trial lawyer in Chicago, like our father before us, and a dual national, is to say, yes, this is not the Nazi Holocaust against the Jews. It's different, but it is still genocide because it qualifies under the test of the Genocide Convention. And so what I recommended is that we need one word. I recommended hecatomb, which means a burnt up offer. And indeed, if you go back at the time, Irish sources and even British sources dealing with this issue were critical, use both word Holocaust and hecatomb to describe what the British did to us. And I have one source in there on hecatomb. So my advice is, let the Jewish people handle the Holocaust and the Shoah. I don't think we should be borrowing those terms. Let them keep the unique nature of what happened to us to them. But it's a unique nature of what happened to us. So I said, let's use genocide. Let's call it hecatomb, the Irish hecatomb, and leave it at that. And let the Jews do what they will with Holocaust and Shoah out of respect to it. And that way also, we don't fall into the British trap saying that, well, since this was not Nazi Holocaust against the Jews, it wasn't genocide. They've already made that argument against us over here in America. And I'm responding to that argument. Because there are some Irish Americans are using the word Holocaust and Shoah. And, I guess people do what they feel they should do, but I'm just arguing it as a legal matter. Let's stay out of that issue because Jews feel sensitive when it comes to those two terms. So fine, we have Irish Jews there too. So fine, let's not intrude on their territory. But we have our own territory and we have our own argument, and that's what we need to concentrate on.
So just to sort of challenge this laissez-faire economics put forward as the motive or the intent, as the academic historians would have us believe, I think it was in Cecil Woodham Smith claimed that the amount of money paid in soldiers' salaries to protect the food exports out of Ireland was actually more than the value of the food exported into Britain at the time. So that would kind of suggest that laissez-faire economics wasn't a reason for the food removals and the British presence here.
And those soldiers were shooting some of our people dead too.
Yeah.
And that qualifies as genocide, killing members of the group. Right.
Yeah.
So we have to keep that in mind, yes.
So, and as far as the legislators were concerned, you want to go through some of the laws that were brought in, which would clearly show intent.
I go through those laws in the materials, and I point out that those relevant laws, where when they were introduced, the intent was to reduce Irish, and they knew it at the time.
Yeah.
Again, you need to go to the two Keneally books and Wood and Smith, read about the laws. But what I singled out were those portions where the authors of the law admitted a genocidal intent when they introduced the law, or if when the law was introduced it was not a genocidal intent, its application degenerated into genocidal intent, that they enforced the law for reasons of genocide, right?
So I think we should definitely, in Ireland anyway, explode this myth of the natural disaster, and we need to start looking back in it, and I think your book would be a great reference for people to do that.
Right, he priced it inexpensively, it's a paperback for, $15 or something. We have a British distributor actually who took it, believe it or not, despite its highly controversial nature. I don't think we get a distributor in Ireland, but the closest distributor we do have is in the U.K. And they did take the book, although I had to delete some portions I won't discuss here. I think it was a real coup d'etat that we got a British distributor to take this book. But there was a chapter in there I had to take out, and I won't discuss that because we didn't want to lose our British distributor. So I guess what people are saying, well, why did Boyle get a Brit distributor here?
Yeah.
I thought it would be ironic and fitting and a real coup d'etat to get a British distributor. So we do have a British distributor over there in London for this book, and you can order it through our British distributor, right? And my hat goes off to our British distributor for taking this extremely controversial book on.
Yeah.
But I thought it was a coup d'etat that we were able to get a British distributor.
Well, I hope some Irish distributors will take it up.
Maybe it shows that there are people in Britain who understand this issue and are sensitive to the issue. And we have to understand that too. Because they've been told for generations by their own ruling elite over there, well, this was just laissez-faire economics. So we have to understand they've been lied to.
Oh yeah.
By their own government.
They were subjects of the same regime. You know, the same crown. That's
correct. Only they weren't starved to death. But other than that, they were lied to as well. And so we have to be, I would say, sensitive to the British people, but no mercy to the British government.
Absolutely.
That's always been my attitude.
Absolutely.
Right. I don't give the British government an inch. If you read my book, you'll see my battles against the British government here in the United States and abroad for at least the last 30 years. Yeah. So they don't get an inch, and the British government gets no respect for me. But the British people are a very different issue. Yeah. And as you know, many Irish live over there anyway. Yeah. So we have to be careful. Yeah. Keep that distinction.
It's amazing that the ideology of the British ruling elite hasn't changed in so long. They still perceive themselves as this beacon of civilization, and they'll go in and invade countries and sanction slaughter of thousands of people so that they can see their way of life, as if it's some divine God-given.
As you know, Ireland was Britain's first colony. After the Normans invaded England, the next king there, the next Norman king, then invaded Ireland. So we've seen the British conquest, genocide, right from the beginning. So you can't fool the Irish on this. Unfortunately, I'm afraid there are some elements here in America, Irish Americans, who have now become Anglophiles, because that's the thing to do. But I would say most of us, the vast majority of us, are not. But yes, it is true, the American elite is these days incredibly highly Anglophile. And so if you want to travel in those circles, you have to become Anglophile. Now, I spent 7 years at Harvard, and it was all highly Anglophile. Although I have to say, in a tribute to Harvard, the 7 years I spent there, not one person ever insulted me for being Irish. Not one person. So I think that's good. But the elite circles here in America are highly Anglophile, and you got to deal with that. Sure. And if you want to become part of them, you have to become Anglophile yourself.
I read the letter. You sent me a letter that you circulated amongst Illinois about the Paddy's Day, St. Patrick's Day, Stubberfest.
Fire crawl. It's a drunk fest. It's going up today. I've done the best I can to stop it over the years. I'm still working on it. What can I say? The bar and liquor store owners have a town-wide drunk fest defiling and desecrating St. Patrick once a year.
Yeah, it happens here in Ireland too. I mean, it's unbelievable. But that's like the pinnacle of our culture is getting silly drunk and stupid drunk. It's not the music and the poetry of the Irish. It's this drinking culture, and that's put forward as the highlight of our culture. But it's also a darkness of our psychology, and it might be connected to the fact that we're unable to look at the famine and the.
I think so, that the reaction to the famine has driven so many Irish to drink, and that just leads to their destruction and the continuing debilitation of our people. I mean, I'm not a teetotaler, I like wine and beer and fine, but I think it's just highly self-destructive behavior that can be traced back to the famine, and also the fact that so many Irish men just don't get married and have families and children. This too can be traced back to the famine. Yes, and so the consequences of this for our entire race of people have been incalculable, and we really need to start coming to grips with it for our own good, for the good of our families and our children and the next generations, to try to work our way out of this self-destructive cycle, but to do so in a constructive and in a strong way, because we did throw the British out of Ireland. There's still the 6 Northeast counties, but they'll be going soon. I point that out in my book. So, we're not. This must not be an exercise in victimology.
Yeah.
Or pity or anything like that. We don't want it.
Yeah.
We want justice. We want accountability. We don't want anyone's pity because we don't need it.
So, have you looked at what happened you said your father was forced to leave in 1921. Have you looked at what happened?
My grandfather.
Sorry, your grandfather, yeah.
Had to leave, right.
Yeah.
Because they were fighting with the IRA. That's why they left.
Yeah.
But I guess the Brits were after them, and they had to go. This is out in County Kerry. Yeah.
Have you looked at any of the...
My grandmother was 8 months pregnant with my father. So it must have been a very abrupt departure.
Yeah.
Yeah. They took a boat, and I think they landed in Philadelphia or something like that. But they had to go. Yeah.
Drop everything and go, yeah.
Just go. Right. Yeah. It was 1921. Right.
Have you looked at the formation of the provisional government, for example, like the signing of the Anglo-Irish Treaty, and there are several anomalies to do with those things in regard to international law? I was just wondering, did you ever pick up on them, or? Sure.
I discuss, I won't go through them all here, but say the border, there's no border. It was never formally demarcated. I've been on a tour. Irish people take me on a tour of the border, and as you know, there is no border. It isn't there. You can drive around all up and down, back and forth. No one knows exactly where that in the back roads. You have no idea where the border is. There are no signs. It's never been properly demarcated. That just gives you an example. Yes, there are. The whole thing was kind of bogus. I know there were opinions on both sides. Sean MacBride, my dear friend, eventually broke from Michael Collins over this. So, okay, I'm not criticizing anyone. We have to move forward from here. And that's why I wrote the final chapter in my book on United Ireland, is how can we supersede all this and build on the 3 traditions in Ireland. The tradition of the Easter Proclamation, which I take the position that state still legally exists.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But as I argued in my book, the Irish Republic of 1916 still exists as a matter of international law. Then we have the Republic of Ireland and its tradition, and then we have the North, that I would call Northern Ireland, and the Protestant tradition up there. So what I try to do in the concluding chapter of the book is to say, fine, let's incorporate all these elements and transcend them and build a new Ireland for everyone with everyone's consent, and not put aside or displace or disrespect anyone's tradition. But let's do it. So my concluding chapter offers my thoughts on that issue as well, where I try to design, from a legal perspective, a United Ireland state. I won't go through all the details. It's just, it's a first draft that I'm putting out there for people to consider. I know I did send it over there to Sinn Féin. And, Jerry Adams sent me a nice letter back. Thank you, because I've done some pro bono work for Sinn Féin. And maybe, some of the other parties, I have friends in the the three other parties, Labour, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael. I have friends in all of them, in politicians, and I met with them and dealt with them, and lawyers. And so I'm trying to write it in a non-judgmental way, and to build on all three traditions and heritages, because we can't, the Protestants are our brothers and sisters.
Absolutely, yeah.
We have to operate from that perspective, and we have to make a United Ireland applicable to them, and also the Jews. I pointed them out. We, unlike any other country in Europe, Ireland has never persecuted the Jews, to our credit. So, we have to always consider them there as well. And now, there are other ethnic minority groups that have moved to Ireland as well.
Yeah. You mentioned the 1916 proclamation. The first two words in the 1916 Irish men and Irish women. There was no difference between Protestant and Catholic, and it was amazing for itself at the time that it actually included women. It wasn't really a thing to do at the time.
With men, and in the struggle for Irish independence, women were just as important as the men.
Yeah.
And my grandmother, was, I'm sure, not only helping, but probably assisting my grandfather. I mean, obviously being pregnant, I doubt she was out there with a rifle, but I'm certain she knew exactly what he was doing, and she was helping him at all times. And I didn't know my grandfather. He died before I was born, but I did know my grandmother quite well. And she was a tough old bird. There's no question about that.
And as well, in relation to international law, there was the 1918 election, and that established a 32 county republic based on the 1916 proclamation. And there's never...
It is in the book. Briefly, I said, all that continues legally. It was never validly terminated by the Treaty of Partition that was forced on Ireland by the British threat. And we all know what that threat was. And so, under basic principles of international law, an agreement signed under duress and threat and coercion is invalid. And so, for that reason, I have argued in my book that that 1916 state, the proclamation, the parliament legally still exists, even though it has somewhat become dormant, but it's still there, right? And I've always, because of my heritage, honored the Republican tradition. I'm Republican myself, proud of it. Catholic myself, proud of it. Irish myself. Yeah.
There's actually a ceremony I came across a few years ago, and it has to do with Ireland's Independence Day. And if you ask anybody in Ireland, when is Ireland's Independence Day? Oh, they'll say, I didn't even know we had an independence. They'd say 4th of July or something like that, you know. But this ceremony takes place, and it's the anniversary of when the first Dáil Éireann met in 1919. And this ceremony takes place every year. The tradition was handed down from family from generation to generation, and it still goes on. And
what day is that?
The 21st of January. I can
celebrate Easter Monday,
as we all do here as well. But I can send you some information on that after our little interview here. It's very interesting because I didn't know this went on. I was never taught about this in school.
Oh. Was Sinn Féin doing that?
No, Sinn Féin won't even recognise it.
Really?
Yeah.
Right. Well,
so
you should talk to Jerry Adams and Martin McGuinness about that.
I have my suspicions about who they're handled by, but anyway, we'll leave that for another.
I'm not expressing any criticisms of anyone in particular now.
Yeah.
It's not going to do that.
Yeah. No, but so if we take it up to today then, and you say how they were established through how they were established, we've got 2 failed states on one island.
Well, we have a failed state in the Republic and a little colonial enclave in the north. And again, I don't mean at all to criticize Protestants living there. They're my brothers and sisters. But it's a colonial enclave. It's sort of like the Falkland Islands down there that the British are all claiming self-determination for now.
Yeah.
It's a colonial enclave. So we have the Republic of Ireland that's a failed state and a colonial enclave. And I'm suggesting let's put them all together and create a new state that's viable and functioning for all Irish, Protestants, Catholics, Jews, and everyone else. But you're right. The Republic of Ireland is a failed state. Sean MacBride was right.
So the book is United Ireland, Human Rights and International Law, and you can get it from what's the name of the British distributor?
Yeah, the British distributor is Marsden.
Okay.
That's the British distributor. And you can also get it at Amazon.com.
Okay.
But the British distributor is Marsden. And, I guess that does show that there are reasonable people in Britain that are willing to listen to our arguments. And, we have to be reasonable in dealing with the British people and polite and respectful. The British government, we just have to fight like hell and not give them an inch.
Yeah.
Because I dealt with the British elite. They know who they are. They know exactly what they're doing. And you have to fight them. But the people, that's a different matter.
Yeah. So, Professor Francis A. Boyle, thanks very much. It was an honour to have you on. And good luck with the book.
Thanks. I'm really happy to talk with you. And I do want to just say hi to all my fellow Irish. And have a great St. Patrick's Day.
Thank
And
you.
let's celebrate St. Patrick. Not desecrate St. Patrick.
Yeah.
That's what we have to do.
Yeah.
We celebrate him, but we don't desecrate.
Yeah.
It's one of the great figures of Western civilization. As you know, he wasn't even Irish.
Yeah.
So we have to celebrate him, commemorate him, sure.
Well, we'll lift a glass to Professor Boyle in Illinois for his recent book. Fantastic work.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks.